do two things. Who knows, maybe it turned into 3 or 5. But I want to not reflect, but just point at the scriptures just a little bit. I'm actually not going to preach from those scriptures, but I wanted to. But I chose those scriptures because they're very fitting as we think about those that have gone on, those who were part of our lives but are no longer with us. The scriptures, and as the special music these are eschatological pieces. Sort of a long word, big word, which basically means eschatology is the conversation about the end of things, about death, about life beyond death. It's a theological term, and these scriptures are eschatological. And the song that the choir sang from Mozart is eschatological. The scriptures basically were saying that in the end there's God, and in the weariness of life, and there were times in our history of humanity that life was much more wearisome than it is for those of us that enjoy many luxuries today, and life was short. But there are these passages, the passages that we read, says in the end is God, and God is good, and you can count on that. And in the requiem that was sung, it's a prayer. It's a prayer that's asking for the goodness of God to be bestowed upon those that have already gone. I had a friend, he was a pastor in Memphis, Tennessee. He was an outstanding speaker, and I'd heard him preach at. We'd had to preach at a number of campus ministry meetings or campus meetings. But his name was Jim Hatley. Jim said, I don't have any trouble believing in some of the more mystical kinds of things about life after death, because my experience isn't that just like God? That God is full of surprises, and that God is full of goodness. And so, on this, as we think about those that have gone on, those who've touched our lives but have gone on, let us. I guess what I want to do is to celebrate that they are in the arms of a loving, forgiving, caring God, and that also that which needs to be new is new in their lives. Today, we celebrate All Saints. We call this All Saints Sunday. And I don't know. I'm sure that I didn't bring that here. We were doing that before I came, right, as a church. And so I was thinking about All Saints, and I've said this, I've confessed this to you a lot of times when we focused on some of the liturgical kinds of things the year that are part of the liturgical year. We don't. Growing up, I didn't know anything about All Saints, and I didn't know anything about All Souls, and I only knew about Halloween. And the only way that was a religious experience was that I was very grateful for the candy, thankful for the candy that I got. And that may be the experience for some of you. Maybe you have not been a part of All Saints, and I know some of you come from other traditions where All Saints is a regular kind of thing. But I know that many of us have not. That's not a part of our background. In the liturgical churches, the churches that celebrate All Saints and All Souls, many of them will have special services on November 1st for All Saints, November 2nd for All Souls. And what we do here, first of all, we don't have anybody to make people saints, the official saints, And secondly, we sort of focus in on the writings in the New Testament, where it seems that when Paul writes to a congregation, he writes to the saints there, but he's not writing to the upper echelon of Christians that are in that church. He's writing to everybody, and so we sort of think of each other, all who are a part of the community of God, as being saints. And so when we think of All Saints, when we do something like All Saints Sunday, we sort of combine, we think about the heroes in our faith, and we also think about those that maybe, those family members and friends who've gone on. Another phrase that's around a good bit that you may hear something about is the Day of the Dead. The Day of the Dead it comes from I think of it as coming from a Latino culture, and it's usually it emphasizes it focuses on those who've gone on, and even there's belief that there's some time when they sort of get to come back. And it's a way. And any of you who saw Coco said, "You see Coco the movie?" That's a Walt Disney movie. If you haven't seen it, you might want to take a look at it on this Halloween Eve, Halloween day. But it sort of says that that it's a time when we remember those who were precious to us, family members. It's also a festive time, and it's a time that when children learn about sort of the cycle of life, that death is a part of the cycle of life, and rather than being something to just fear, it's a part of the cycle of life, and that those who pass through that are still remembered. Now, in the tradition of others, those who celebrate All Saints and All Souls, All Saints are generally thought of as being martyrs, and saints are heroes of the faith. I thought today I'd invite you to remember and to think about some of the people in your lives who've gone on, who were sort of heroes, spiritual heroes for you. And in addition to that, to think about others that you love, who are no longer with us. And then at the end, after I finish this part, you'll be invited to light a candle for those that are for those that you are all about. The lighting of the candle is a way to remember. It's also a way to celebrate the life. Now, I thought I would tell you about two saints in my life. Two of the people that have influenced me. The older you get, if you remember, they're Pat understands. If you remember, if you can remember, there are lots of people that have touched our lives. As for those of us that we are aging, there are people that have been we have more and more heroes, of the faith. If we're blessed to have those. I wanted to tell you, and as I tell you these, as I said, you might think of people in your life. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my Aunt Dale. Her name was Josie Dale. Josie Dale Twiglett. My family there's some interesting first and middle names in my family, and it seems that they all sort of pop up from time to time. My mother was Edna Ruby. My twin brother was Edgar Rufus, and my dad was Buford LaBelle. There's some interesting names. We didn't choose any of those for our children, but my Aunt Josie Dale, her sisters and brothers called her Josie, and we cousins called her Aunt Dale. She grew up in rural Mississippi, Holmes County, Mississippi. I don't think my grandparents were church people. I don't think they were a part of a community, only loosely a part of a church community. But there was a little beginning of a Church of God church in that community. And my Aunt Dale found meaning and found God in the midst of that congregation, and helped to bring all of her siblings, my mother, and uncles and aunts, helped them to become a part of that. Aunt Dale graduated and went to Anderson College in Indiana. There she met my Uncle John, who was teaching at Anderson, and married. I wish I had thought about it when they were alive to ask them questions about that. But my Aunt Dale and my Uncle John, I always saw them as being very, very pious. They came, I had 3 cousins. They had 2 sons and a daughter, and I would see them. I would see them in the summer. A couple of times in my childhood, we drove to Indiana, which was a great trip. Back we're talking right after wagon trains, and but we would drive to Indiana, and that was a great experience. And then they would come south. When I was in the 6th grade, my parents were somber and were really concerned, and so much so that they told me that they were praying for my Aunt Dale, that she had cancer, and that there was a good chance that she would not survive. And I remember that day, just all throughout that day, as a 6th grader, praying for her. The strangest kind of thing happened. She was sent home and assumed that she would not survive. She went home and she survived. And in that experience of prayer and surrender to God, Uncle John and Aunt Dale felt a call to go south. And they moved to Memphis. Uncle John left his position as professor of chemistry and moved to Memphis. Now they were sort of an odd couple. I won't say looking. My aunt was tall and slim and had red hair. My uncle was short and stocky and was bald. And he was from German stock, and he was a bit brusque. We cousins sort of gave him lots of space. And my aunt was from rural Mississippi, probably Scandinavian heritage, and was much kinder and approachable. But they moved south, moved into an African American community. My aunt, and this was before the schools were integrated. My aunt applied and started teaching in an elementary school in that neighborhood, and my uncle took a position at Lemoyne Owen College, which was a historic Baptist college. Not only did they do that, but they became the joint pastors of a Church of God church in that community. So they lived there. Their children grew up there. They became a part of that community. I've been in their home when neighbors were in and out, and they really brought the incarnation. They incarnated Christ's love into their home, through their home, into that community. There's some other stories about challenges, racial challenges that had occurred. They attempted to work with a group of educators to start a school for young pastors who were not able to go to college or seminary in Union, Mississippi, which was about probably 200 miles from Memphis. And as they were working on that, setting up that school, they would come in from Memphis. They would go from Memphis into Mississippi, and as they entered Mississippi, they were always picked up by they were always followed by a either the highway patrol or the local police, and as they traveled across the state. The school didn't work out. They ended up helping establish one in Texas. But they continued and lived out their whole career in Memphis. My cousins married people from that they met in school and in the neighborhood. My aunt was she was driving. A drunk driver went through a stop sign and hit her car and left her permanently. Had caused her not to be able to use one of her arms. But she continued teaching. Just kept on going. I think of her and Uncle John in sort of hero status. They put them in these. And when I think of what they gave me, they brought me, they modeled courage for me and faithfulness. Now, the second saint that came to mind was someone I mentioned it here before, but I decided I'd tell you about it rather than do a pop quiz. Was laughing. That was his Greg Jones. Greg Jones. Well, I mean, when I was a campus minister, I was looking. We were not doing a very good job of reaching African American students on our campus in our campus ministry. So I was always looking for somebody to help me, and I couldn't find that kind of leadership and commitment from anybody that was a local pastor until Greg Jones. Greg Jones moved to Starkville, home of Mississippi State University that beat Kentucky last night, and but Greg Jones moved to Starkville, and I thought, oh, maybe this will work. He might be able to work out. This might work out, and so I invited him to speak to our campus ministry worship time. We have a Tuesday night worship time called Priority, and he did a good job. And so then I took him to dinner afterwards, and there was a tension there. I felt like I was being weighed, and so I made several other attempts to get with Greg, but I felt like he was really suspicious of me. One day, Greg gave me a call and said, "Can we get together?" He had just returned from a conference, and it was a conference for ministers, and in the conference, the speaker had challenged those who were there to cross the line, to cross the racial lines, and to cross and also denominational lines. And Greg said, as I thought about that, I thought about you, and I thought, would you be willing to meet with me once a week to pray? And so we began meeting once a week to pray. At the same time, there was an Episcopal priest who said, he went to that same conference, and he said, I felt like God was leading me, not saying, but leading me to find someone who was not an Episcopalian, to get to know. Would you be willing? And so I said yes. So the three of us began meeting. George left and went to was assigned to another parish. But Greg and I became friends. But it wasn't easy. We had to be very deliberate because our circles were different, and the drift of our cultures were away from each other, not toward each other. We had to decide that we were going to be together. We had to make an effort. And so in that effort, it became easier and easier because we liked each other a lot. And Greg modeled for me what it was like to be a friend. And he also modeled for me what it was like to celebrate and be playful. We made many trips to Dreamland, which was a rib place in Tuscaloosa, 90 miles away. We did road trips to get ribs. Anytime I had a trip, Greg would be willing to go with me. So he was my traveling partner. We traveled As I went through hard times, Greg was there. So Greg is a saint that modeled for me friendship and helped me to see the importance of friendship. And also taught me that you cannot model community unless you're with someone else. It takes two to model community. You can be kind, you can be kind to other people, but unless there are two of you that are walking together, community is never modeled. Friendship and playfulness were things that Greg gave me. Greg died about 4 or 5 years ago, and I still miss him, and I still wish that there are times when I wish I could pick up the phone and ask him if he's seen the news lately. And he was my guide. He was my guide that led me into African American culture around me, a place that I had not been, a place that sometimes I had misunderstood. And he also was my guide to help me to see who I was in light of the white privilege that I had been given. I could say more about both of those people, but I won't. I thought about other saints too. Some of the saints I don't know. John Claypool, I knew him a little bit. I met him. He's an outstanding preacher and writer. If I could preach like John Claypool, that would just be wow. That would be amazing. He did a great job. He just did a great job of interpreting the gospel. C.S. Lewis is another person that was a saint. He and I theologically probably have drifted apart. He hasn't. He would stay the same, but we drifted apart. But in his writings, I saw a creativity that it illumined some of the concepts in scriptures to me. Who are the people in your life? Who are the people that have touched your life? Who are the saints, if you have a saint list? And while you're thinking about that, I want you to also think about who are the people that you might not call a saint, but they're brothers or sisters or mothers or dads that have left, people that you would love to, it's good that you would say it's good that we remember them on this day. I'm going to light a candle, not for one of these that I've mentioned, but I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to light a candle for Tom Slade. Tom Slade was a student that came to Mississippi State. He was from the Gulf Coast, and he worked and when he came, we had a large Wednesday noon meal. And Tom's niche was that he assisted our staff in preparing that meal and helped to organize other students who did that. He worked hard. The first year of COVID, Tom, who after graduation became a history teacher on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, died of COVID, and he comes to my mind. I invite you to come up and